something I believe we need to build. The archaeological sites that Syria is, and as we think about economic growth and economic prosperity, they provide us with a network of incredibly rich assets for us to think about how regional development and regional growth can benefit. And here I'm not specifically looking directly at the potential for tourism and the potential for mass tourism or marketing, but I'm actually looking at the potential for local human development. When we continue to develop our communities, our local communities, and we continue to to make a bridge between the artifacts of the past and the society that we live in, these artifacts don't remain artifacts of the past. They become artifacts and are very much abundant in our society today. As I said earlier, Damascus is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. That is no small feat. It takes effort to keep that city alive, to keep its residents alive and living inside it. And those of you who visited will see that what makes it special is the butcher and the grocer and the schools and the families going about their day-to-day lives. Intermingled with all of that, of course, is the increase in tourism, and it's the increase in interest globally for what Syria has to offer. But fundamentally, it's based on keeping those local communities alive and keeping them attached to the very essence of our history and our culture. Buildings are important, whether they're historic or modern. But I believe that without the human potential, without human capabilities, and without the human passion and power, these buildings remain architectural splendors of the past. The second core element of what we're trying to achieve in Syria is developing our human capability and our human capacity. 60% of our population is under 25. And some often say to me, how are you going to deal with this challenge? I don't see it as a challenge. I see it as our biggest opportunity, and the opportunity for us to be able to develop a nation that we can be proud of, that has built and is built on the pride of the country and the history that we have. But that population needs to be empowered. It needs to be involved in the change and the economic opportunities that are evolving and increasingly being apparent in the country. For them to be involved, they need the right training, they need the right access to employment, and they need the right access to credit. Culture has the opportunity to provide at least some of these spheres of interaction. I've been talking this morning or yesterday with some of the French institutions as to how we can develop the potential and develop the human capabilities that we have in Syria to be able to increase the opportunities for employment and increase the opportunities for enterprise around our cultural and historic sites. So I've spoken a little bit about the role that culture has in our society. I've spoken a little bit about the role or the way that we need to develop the human capacity and the human potential that we have, and that the importance of that the significance of that in terms of the cultural renaissance that we're going through at the moment. And they're both important. One, I cannot succeed without the other. There is a third element, and that is the role that museums play in our modern history, in our society, and in the way that we interpret our history. Many of you have been to Syria, and whereas you are astounded by the artifacts that you see in the museums, the comment I always hear is, but the building could be better. And that's a polite or diplomatic comment that I get. Now, we realize that having such a vast and diverse range of artifacts. And during our last assessment, we realized that there are over 150,000 pieces of unique grade A quality artifacts. Most of them have not been seen in public. They're in storage, and they need to be brought up into the open. So another facet of this initiative is to develop the museums of the country. The museum in Damascus being the national museum, but also, as I said, the importance of what we're trying to do is regional growth and regional prosperity. So we will not lose sight of the fact that there are museums spread all around the country, and they too need to be incorporated into what we're doing. The museums and the way we see them, we're in discussions at the moment to see how this can be developed into a network. And by network, I don't mean a collection of buildings and institutions gathered under one umbrella. I mean a network that can collectively tell the story of Syria, that can collectively share the artifacts, but more importantly, promote the values, the inherent values that make us who we are today. This is a vision that we embarked on 3 years ago. And I remember during my last visit to Paris in 2008, and during the meetings that we had with, where I had with the Louvre and with Monsieur Loiret, I discussed the opportunity of developing our long-standing and albeit small-scale, if you allow, small-scale relationship to a much higher level. And of course, Monsieur Loiret appreciated and understood the significance of what Syria has to offer in terms of its diversity and in terms of its history and its heritage. And whereas some nations today are trying to create culture from scratch, we realize that France and Syria are very developed and sophisticated nations in this regard. And the opportunity for partnership and complementarity is vast. In France, you have some of the best institutions for interpreting and studying the past. And in Syria, we have some of the best laboratories and research materials. And so, if anything, we need you as much as you need us. The Louvre team has been working in Syria since then, and I'm happy to say that the contribution that they have made has been significant in helping us formalize and finalize the vision that will be launched in April. The relationships during this period, during the last 2 years between our two countries have warmed, and they have significantly increased, and I obviously hope that this will continue. In France, we see, as in Syria, a proud, cultured nation, a nation that is influential in Europe. And I would like to say, if you allow, influential not just because of the savviness of your politicians, but also because of the history and the heritage that you have and the respect that that heritage and that history provides you amongst the other European countries. At the beginning of this year, as Monsieur Mitterrand mentioned, a government-to-government partnership was signed to cement the relationship further. It incorporates the work of the Louvre, but also encourages other institutions to participate in a partnership which I feel is significant to both our two countries. And here I'd like to also emphasize the fact that I believe we've learned from a lesson past. In the past, we tended to put our eggs into one basket. If the politics was going well, then everything else was going well. If the politics was going through a downturn, then nothing else was happening. And so the lesson that we've learned by cementing this relationship and by ensuring that it's a government-to-government relationship is that there is sustainability, and we are able to safeguard ourselves amongst the prevailing political winds, which, as you know, will change according to circumstance. April is the month where we are hoping to launch the initiative, and we are looking forward to having our French partners involved, not just as guests, but involved in the unveiling of what we're trying to achieve. Up until April, we'll be signing with other governments and other institutions as part of our view that this project, whilst Syrian and being delivered by Syria, but actually as it represents the story of human history, can only benefit from these collaborations. And it's the spirit of these collaborations that I'd like to focus on in my last comment. In the world we live in today, and over the past 10 years, two words have been reoccurring in our daily dialect: extremism and terrorism. And with these words, we hear a multitude of approaches as how best to deal with them. The military approach has proven to be a complete failure, and if anything, in my opinion, completely counterproductive to what we need to achieve. Some proponents of this approach have moved on to more enlightened forms of nation building, which includes education and development. But I'd like to argue that unless we include culture in what we're trying to achieve, I don't believe that we'll be able to build the future that we all aspire to. And here, just to give it into contrast, it's like it's the difference between knowing how to use a computer and what that can provide you, vis-a-vis knowing and understanding how a computer works. And it's only when you understand how the computer works that you're able to influence and affect and support its efficiency, its speed, and its direction. So as significant and as important as education is, as development is, as economic prosperity is, it's only when we put culture at the very heart of what we're trying to achieve that I think we'll be able to produce the fertile soil that we're looking for. Ultimately, culture embraces our human values. It nurtures our human spirit. But more importantly, it reminds us of our shared humanity. I'd like to, as I said when I started, I'd like for this to be a dialogue rather than a monologue. I hope that I have spoken enough, or I've spoken broadly in a way that has given you some insight into Syria, into the changes that are happening, and more specifically, the cultural change that's happening in my country. But as I said, the other main part of meeting with you this evening is to hear your insights, to hear your perspectives, and to take questions that you may have on anything that I've said. So thank you.